Steve earlier mentioned that these are available. These are drawings by Michael Schratt, and they contain many black project drawings of devices that have been manufactured in the Antelope Valley and tested at Area 51 and S4. It's $2, but I have spent hours looking for it over it myself. The next thing is that if any of you were at the symposium 2 weeks ago, maybe you heard Ted Loader. It was an excellent talk. And he talked about his abstract that he wrote to the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. This is a reproduction of his abstract, if you're interested. It also contains an article which I wrote for the MUFON UFO Journal. And as Steve mentioned, I am selling Tim Good's Need to Know separately, but if you are willing to go for the bigger one, I will include Tim Good's book as well. And I make this offer to everybody. I guarantee what you receive, and if you feel that you don't like it, you can send this book back and I'll refund your money and you can keep Tim Good's book. So I don't know what more I can offer. You won't find that from many other authors. The reason why I sell Tim Good's book is that Timothy Good is a very good friend of mine. He's a British writer. He first started writing in the, about 1980s, and he's put out some excellent work, including this one. This one is tied directly to what I'm talking about tonight. It's called Need to Know, UFOs, the Military, and Intelligence. Okay, now, you know, I talk to many members of the general public, and they say this about Area 51 or that, and sometimes this is sort of the image that they have of it. It's not exactly what it looks like. And some people think that there's this big hangar where this odd-looking device can just take off from its position here after this big door opens. But it's not like that either. Now, this is an aircraft sectional chart for Area 51. Right now, I'll just talk about, try to put it in terms of Groom Lake. The facility is based at Groom Lake. And if you were to buy an aircraft sectional chart, it's quite clear as to the limits where you cannot fly into. So if you're a pilot, don't try to fly over Area 51. They will shoot you down. Honest. Officially, it's called the Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3. How do you get there? Well, it's in Nevada, first of all. And you start in Las Vegas. You go out the 15 here. And then you take the 93 up to this point, and then you get onto the extraterrestrial highway that's 375, and eventually you'll come to an overlook of the Tikaboo Valley. And this is what the Tikaboo Valley looks like. This is basically where we test our new aircraft and otherwise. When you get to the top of that peak, you'll see this very straight dirt road that goes directly to the foothills in the back. It's totally unmarked. Don't expect any signs saying Area 51 this way or something like that. Eventually, you'll come to the Area 51 signs. I would suggest that you, at this point, that you just stop there and not go any further. In 1989, my former wife and I took a trip out here. Now, this is before anyone knew about, quote, Area 51. And we went all the way out to the end of that road and finally came up to a chain link fence with a guardhouse. And there was an Air Force truck there, and the guardhouse had one-way mirrors, or one-way glass. And they didn't come out to greet us, but I'm sure they took our license numbers down. So then we turned around and started driving all the way back out. And then as we were out of the foothills, low and slow from the north came an F-4 Phantom fighter from the base. And they were simply, I'm sure, counting the numbers of heads in the car and making sure that the same two people that went in came out. This is what the base looks like from Freedom Ridge, taken years ago. I've given credit to John Lear on this one. I believe he's the one who took that. There are some very large hangars out here, and we'll have an inside look at them in a few minutes. This is what it looks like from a satellite view. This is Groom Lake, and this contains has the longest landing strip in the world. I believe it's 27,000 feet. Now, one of the benefits of living in the Antelope Valley and having my wife in the insurance business was that I met a lot of people that were in the aerospace business. It's an aerospace town out there. And I met one person who claimed that when he was in the Air Force, he flew from the Far East in a cargo aircraft carrying a MiG-21. And even though this may look like a Republic F-105 Thunder Chief, it is actually a MiG-21 with Air Force insignia. And this is how we were able to produce the Top Gun program down near San Diego at Miramar, because the pilots would come here, they would fly the MiGs. This just happens to be one MiG-21, but they have endless others, I'm sure. And they found how to fly it and its limitations, and that's how they're able to teach our pilots to outdo the foe. The next, this is a proof of concept for the F-117A. This was tested out there. This was called Have Blue. Now this is Bill Sweetman's version of what he thinks the Aurora looked like. And this little beauty down in the lower right-hand corner is the Lockheed Martin Boeing B-3 advanced or super stealth aircraft. Now, about 20 years ago, 21 actually, I had a chance to meet Bob Lazar out at the Little Alien in Rachel, Nevada. And I realized that some people in the, quote, UFO community feel that Bob Lazar is a fraud. Did I hear a yes? Okay. Well, I have to say that he seemed like a very mild-mannered, technical person, somewhat retiring, and he seemed to have a story to me. He claimed that he was hired on by EG&G to retro-engineer an extraterrestrial craft at a facility called S4. And this is the extraterrestrial craft that he described. He called it the sport model. So I will have to say that he's certainly a controversial person without any question. In fact, this is Bob Lazar right here, along with Gary Schultz. And in the early 90s, when I met Bob Lazar, he said that if I would go out to into the Tikaboo Valley on Wednesday night, any Wednesday night, basically, he said that there's a very good chance that you'll see some of these devices being tested at the facility that he called S4. Now, he said S4 is roughly 12 to 15 miles south of Groom Lake. And he claimed that there were 9 hangars there, basically embedded into a mountain in the Papoose Range, and on Papoose Lake. Now, all I know is that I joined Gary's secret saucer base expeditions many times. I've lost count as to how many times I've been out there. And sometimes, frankly, nothing would happen at all. Sometimes the guys at S4 would send up flares just to get us excited. Imagine that. You go all the way out there and they send up flares. But on certain nights, you could see what I've called here night lights. And you would see these red-orange, brightly colored lights that would ascend vertically. They'd go to the left, they go to the right. They would not follow a standard flight line like an aircraft. Sometimes they would wink out, sometimes they'd wink on. And we saw this any number of nights on repeated expeditions. Now, the truth is, I don't know if that facility there is called S4 or R2 or D2. I have no idea. It could be called anything, but most people seem to think that S4 is the name. But I can tell you this, there is a facility there. Now, one night, Gary Schultz, typically what he would do is he had a small camera, film camera, with high-speed film in it, and he would go out there and he'd click at that light and click at that light and click at that light, and he would have all of these develop. Now, one night when he was out there, he saw a red flashing light just hovering, and this is what came out. This is high-speed film, push process. That's why it's so grainy. But I think it's clearly not something that we would normally see. Just to get a sense of this, Groom Lake is in the upper right-hand corner. You can see part of Groom Lake and the runways and the hangars. And then the S4 facility is on Papoose Lake under one of the mountains in the Papoose Range, about 12 to 15 miles or so. Now, this is where I have to make a disclaimer, because I'm going to be talking about 3 people who claim to have worked at S4. I don't know if they did or not, but I'm just going to tell you their stories. You can make up your own mind. Bob Lazar claimed that he was brought on by EG&G and that he actually was paid by naval intelligence. And he was brought in to back engineer the sport model. The next gentleman is Captain Bill Uhouse. He is a former Marine pilot, mechanical engineer, and he claimed that he was brought in to develop and install a flight simulator. And the flight simulator was to simulate a flying disc. And this is Dr. Dan Burish. His claim was that he worked at S4 as a microbiologist. Now, I'm not going to go into biology tonight. We're just talking the technical side. By the way, Captain Bill Uhouse is mentioned in Ted Loder's abstract, and he is also one of Dr. Stephen Greer's witnesses. According to these folks, this is Project Aquarius, and the administrators of the Office of Naval Intelligence and the Defense Intelligence Agency. These next few drawings were drawn by Michael Schratt of Open Minds magazine. Now these, according to this, if you land at the heliport on a helicopter from Groom Lake, he said this is what you call walking the line. You have to carefully walk between the blue lines and not go beyond the red line. Now what you see over here on the left under the mountain are the 9 hangars starting from the left, and then there's other rooms just as you come through the door. Sorry? Basically, it's a very tight security. The guards are told not to allow anyone to go beyond the red line. That's about all I can say. This is the entry area to S4. You can see this long entry area and a waiting area. My recollection was that Bob Lazar said that there was this X-Files poster, but it said, according to him, they're here. Honest. According to the testimony, is that the first few offices on the left are for propulsion and for avionics laboratories. And then you walk on down further, and you pass through 1 or 2 doors. And according to these folks, this is what you see in Hangar 1. This is what Dr. Dan Burish referred to as a sport model. And this is where we also have some matchup here with what Bob Lazar said. Hangar 2 contained a identical copy of the sport model. Hangar 3 was said to contain the Roswell craft, and as you can see here, it has a tarp over it. Yeah, this is Jim Nichols' version of the Roswell crash retrieval. Sorry about this. Okay. It's always good to have laughter in a program like this because it's a rather serious topic. Okay. Hangar 4. This is what was referred to as the Orion craft. Now, don't ask me why it was called the Orion craft. Michael Schratt, who interviewed Dr. Dan Burish, doesn't know. But anyway, that was my question. Where have we seen something like this? Sort of looks like the Fluxliner alien reproduction vehicle that Mark McCandlish drew. Hangar 5, I believe that's the one that was empty as well. Let's see, Hangar 6. Now, this is sort of interesting. They claim that there was an alien reproduction vehicle of the Roswell craft. And it looks sort of like that. Now, you might just do a design comparison between the alien craft from Roswell and the F-22 Raptor, which happens to be a Lockheed Martin product. Michael Schratt's comment was that if you took off the two vertical stabilizers, removed the engines and the air intakes, and you extended the wings from the wing tip to about here, it would fairly closely simulate the Roswell craft. Of course, the Roswell craft ARV would have to also include some different propulsion. Hangar 7 was claimed to be the Kingman craft. It also was covered by a tarp. Now, my guess is that if this is true, the two craft that are covered with a tarp are ones which were damaged in one way or the other. And this is an artist's illustration of what some believe the Kingman craft looked like that crashed in 1953. That's Kingman, Arizona, by the way. Hangar 8 was what they call the licorice drop. Michael tells me that this was a very highly polished black, sort of a triangular pyramid-shaped device. Does anyone think that that looks like something they might have seen from some other incident? Jonathan Reed? Oh, I'm not familiar with him. Is that right? Rendlesham. Well, that's the one from the Rendlesham Forest. And it was triangular, a pyramid, and according to the descriptions from the various Air Force investigators, it was black and highly polished. The only thing is that I asked Michael if the licorice drop had any kind of script around it, and he said no. But he thought that it might be possibly a derivative of it. Now, let's get to something a little bit more exciting here. This is what Bill Uhouse claims that he developed and installed. It was a flying disc flight simulator. And it was supposed to be modeled after the Kingman device. Basically, what we're looking at is a 1 foot diameter shaft with a 3 foot diameter ball bearing, for lack of better words. And what would happen is that there were 6 very highly charged capacitors inside this simulator. And one of the operators was over here, and what they would do is attach this power umbilical cord, recharge the capacitor, and then disconnect that. And then the pilot would enter, and these are called snubbers. They sort of stabilize the craft when it's not in motion. And the idea is that it has a full yaw, roll, and pitch. Now, I guess the question then becomes, why not just have 1 or 2 test pilots out there to fly these devices and leave it at that? Why have flight simulators? Any guesses? Sorry? In case it crashed? Well, that's true. But what I'm trying to suggest is that Bill Uhouse claims that this device was installed in the early 60s. Training. There we go. Now, that's the point I was trying to get to. What my perception is that this is a device to train our Air Force pilots and Navy aviators. And we've been doing this for decades. Now, there are probably, I would say, in my opinion, a lot of pilots pass through here and learn how to fly these devices. And why would we train so many people to fly these devices that we have reproduced? All right, you remember this, right? Here's Commander Corey, and there is Cadet Happy. And they used to zip around, and they were sort of the police, the military police of the galaxy. It's one of my favorite programs. Is it possible? Is it just possible that we have many pilots who are flying a number of these alien reproduction vehicles? Yes? Yes? Okay. Are you with me? Okay. And what group might be in charge of that? Well, it's not the Space Patrol, I'll tell you that much. But what they call themselves is, excuse me. Well, hold on just a minute. I forgot this point. Sort of an important point. This was in 1950, okay? And that's when I was about 8 years old. This, I'm sure some of you recognize, as a scene from Forbidden Planet. Actually, it's a drawing by Jim Nichols. But there is a scene very much like this as this space cruiser carrying a military team to rescue the scientists on Altair 4. This was done in 1956. Okay? 1950, rocket ships. 1956, space cruisers, disc-shaped. Now, the point being is here. It took 2 years to produce that film. So they had to start around 1954. Now, when you're writing a book or you're producing a film, someone's got to write the scripts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm saying that it probably took at least a year, maybe a year and a half, to write the scripts and get set up before they can film. So this may have started, the effort for this may have started in 1952, maybe 53. Now, for those of you who are old enough to remember what was happening in 1952, maybe you can tell me what happened in 1952. Washington, D.C. Who said that? Who? Who said that? Oh, very good. Excellent. Because in 1952, UFOs in some quantity overflew the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And I'm 68 years old. I remember this. And there was fear in the minds of the general public because the Air Force couldn't control the airspace. Fear. Not panic, but fear. I remember that quite clearly. So what I'm saying is, in 1952, between 1950 and 56, when this film came out, you had what happened in 1952. And that's why you had a number of proliferating films coming out of Hollywood about UFOs, some better than others. But, okay, let's go on. Okay, now here we're back to Space Patrol. And my question was, well, what do they call themselves? And they don't call themselves Space Patrol, although they probably should. Actually, what they call themselves, is Naval Space Command. And they call themselves the U.S. Air Force Space Command. Now, let me just ask a question here. What do you think this is, this little tripod thing here? I mean, a triangle thing? Star Trek. Oh, boy, we got a Trekker out here. Oh, yeah, I saw the first episode in 1966, too, so. Right? Are they saying something here to us? Are they trying to teach us something? Is this a subliminal message? Try this one for size. This represents peace. These are olive branches. And this is obviously space, right? You add to that the Star Trek symbol, and that gives you this. Notice the same symbol is being used here, the olive branches. CNSA, what does that stand for? Wild guesses. Chinese National Space Administration. They're Trekkies too. Yeah, I'm sure they are. I hate to tell you this, but this is the Chinese century. All right. Now, so we have two space commands. Since both the services agree on the term Space Command, and from my experience in working with the Navy and the Air Force, when two services work together, they usually put the word joint in the front. So I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, they call themselves the Joint Space Command, or JSPACOM. Maybe you won't buy it, but to me it makes sense. Now, this one's called, Can You Handle the Truth? And the truth, of course, is in quotes. So what I'm suggesting here is that the United States has basically a small fleet of alien reproduction vehicles of different sizes, shapes, and configurations. And yes, maybe they're triangular. And maybe they're big. Why would you want a big spacecraft? To haul little ones, that's right. And to haul cargo, and to haul space modules. Right? Now what I'm saying is here, if you're a taxpayer, you have been paying for this for the last 6 decades. And what I'm suggesting is, yes, I think, in my opinion, we have a base on the moon right now. As I said before, engineers don't want to develop a device or a tool or a craft and put it on the shelf. They want to use it. And I think that's what we've been doing for decades. And how about a base on Mars? Wouldn't that, you'd probably need a fairly good sized craft to transport what you need with the crew and everything else. And I am going to take Ben Rich's word for fact. And I say, yes, we've also traveled to the stars. Now, at this point, I wanted to show Eisenhower's farewell address. Eisenhower wasn't just a president, he was a two-term president, and he was also a 5-star general. That's as high as you can go in the US Army. And he knew the military and he knew industry after all those years. And what he did in 1961, and I don't think this will play, but nope, it's not going to work. Well, oh, okay, well, anyway, it worked at home. Okay, anyway, what he did is this. Just a few days before he left office, he warned us all about the military-industrial complex. And who better to warn us than Eisenhower? And when as a 19-year-old, I thought he was just talking about the American military-industrial complex. I think if he had to say that same speech again, he would say, beware of the international military-industrial complex. Now let's talk about this. We have a problem here on Earth, and it has to do with energy. We have too much invested in the oil business. I like to call it big oil. And some people may say, well, you know, what do you know about oil? Actually, I used to work in Saudi Arabia for Aramco. So I've seen the oil as it comes out of the ground. And believe me, it just gushers out there. They don't have to pump it. I've seen the pipelines that take the product down to Ras Tanura, where it's loaded onto a super tanker. I've been on super tankers. I've seen the offloading facilities, more pipelines, refineries, distribution centers, tanker trucks, and your local gas station. I worked for Mobil Oil Corporation at their headquarters in New York City years ago. So I think I have a pretty good handle on big oil. This is something that we need to solve. And from my point of view, the sooner the better. Now, there's an ad running on television from ExxonMobil, and it has a petroleum engineer or geologist, I think it is. A geologist stands up and he says, we have enough natural gas to pump for the next 100 years. And when you think about it, they probably have enough oil in oil sands and oil shale to also pump for another 100 years. But I question, can this planet take this for another 100 years? To me, the solution for the energy crisis is to release the U.S. anti-gravity technology to the world. Because I know that there is technology in the black world that, if made available to the public and to the world, would solve virtually all of our pollution problems. I think we could eliminate virtually the demand for coal, gasoline, heating oil, diesel, aviation fuels. How many more of these events do we have to go through? This is Chernobyl, by the way, and that's the Gulf oil spill up there. The point being is that there is technology which will provide low-cost, pollution-free electrical energy for just about everybody that can afford, say, maybe $5,000 for their home, for use at their home. All right, in summary, let me just go over this. We are and have been for decades developing and manufacturing flying discs in the Antelope Valley. And we've been testing recovered UFOs and alien reproduction vehicles at whatever facility is called in Nevada, whether it's called S4 or whatever, I don't know. There are two types of real solid UFOs, those that are manufactured by us and those that are manufactured by others beyond Earth. There are actually two space programs. Imagine that. And as taxpayers, you've been paying for this for a long time. The white space program is what I call NASA, the space shuttles, the International Space Station, the Mars rovers. All of that technology is antiquated. It's all rockets and chemical propellants. The black space program is basically recovered UFOs, ARVs, and what I've termed J-SPACOM. We now have the capability, according to Ben Rich, to travel to the stars. But according to him also, is that control of this program has been passed from the U.S. government to an international board of directors. And we now have the capability to solve Earth's energy crisis. So what can you do about all of this? Well, first of all, don't believe a word that I've said tonight. You know, don't believe it. Just keep an open mind. Follow up, study up, get engaged. Talk to your friends. You know, I found this quite revealing. People sometimes that you know don't want to talk about UFOs, but if you ask them what they think about UFOs, they will be quite often quite excited about it. I would suggest you write to your congressperson. Don't email, just write a letter. You'd be surprised how effective letter writing can be if they get enough handwritten letters in quantity. Personally, I've written Congress people. I've even sent copies of my books to a variety of different Congress people. Support the Disclosure Project. And I would suggest that you read Open Minds magazine. I found that to be quite helpful, particularly for people that are just sort of joining this, subject. And generally, get involved.